Linked timecodes for these topics appear in the YouTube description of this video. One of the things that makes performance analytics so powerful is that it's natively available in the ServiceNow platform. That means you don't have to set up a data warehouse or perform any ETL to get started. The data is ready for you to use. However, you probably also have business-critical data applications and databases outside the platform. Visualizing that data alongside the data in the ServiceNow platform provides even more insights into your business's performance and processes because it allows you to see how those data sources relate to each other. The good news is you can add external data sources to the ServiceNow platform as performance analytics indicators. After the data has been added, you can visualize it as a widget or explore it on a scorecard. In this video, we'll show you how to create an external indicator, create an external breakdown, and configure the external indicator to use the external breakdown. We assume you're already familiar with performance analytics indicators, data collection jobs and breakdowns, and that you can create SQL queries. We also assume you have an external JDBC data source already set up. If you don't, you can find instructions in the product documentation. Only users with admin role can set up a new data source, so if you're a PA admin or PA power user, you may need to get help with this. External indicators are slightly different than normal indicators. Before we start, here are a few limitations that are important to know about. No snapshots are collected, only scores. This makes sense. After all, the records that you want to view aren't part of the platform, so you can't see them in the platform. It also means you cannot view changes in collected records. You can't view real-time scores. You can't create second-level breakdowns or visualizations that require second-level breakdowns, such as pivot or heat map. Only JDBC data sources can be used to create external indicators. If your JDBC data source is configured to use an SQL statement, that statement will be ignored. We'll define the SQL statements to use when we configure the external indicator and breakdown. The first step is to create a new external indicator. This is where we define which external data to evaluate. We navigate to Performance Analytics, External Indicators, and click New. External indicators are similar to normal indicators, only these three fields are different. Also, some fields aren't available in external indicators because of the limitations we mentioned earlier. For external indicators, we specify the frequency of data points such as daily, weekly, or monthly in the indicator form. Frequency is usually configured in the indicator source, but because external indicators don't have sources, we do it here instead. Here on the Source tab, we select a data source to collect scores from. Remember, this must be a JDBC data source. Here we specify the SQL statement to use to calculate the score value. Here's the SQL for our data. A couple of things to include in the SQL statement. The aggregate alias must be value. To collect historical data, we filter data based on a date field. This second date function is the date the score will have in the platform. For historical data collections, this date will be in the past. The start date variable always returns the date that the score is being collected for in this format. All the other fields on this form work the same way as on other indicators, so we're not going to describe them now, but you can configure them if you wish. Now we click Test Collection. This checks the validity of the SQL syntax on this form and the connection to the external data source. Looks good. Now that we've created an indicator for our external data, let's create a breakdown for it. If you want to be able to break down or slice data, you have to set up a breakdown for it. In our case, we want to break down our data by country so we can see where our website hits are coming from. To create a new breakdown, we navigate to Performance Analytics, External Breakdowns, and click New. We name this breakdown country, since that's what we're breaking the data down by. We select the same data source we used for the indicator, because that's the data we want to break down. and add SQL that selects our breakdown elements. The SQL statement must return the unique key for each breakdown element as the alias ID, and the element display name as the alias name. If you want to control who can see this breakdown on scorecards, widgets, and dashboards, you can change it here at the bottom. We want everyone to be able to use this breakdown, so we don't need to change anything. We click Test Collection on this form too, to verify that the SQL we've just added is correct. The configuration of this breakdown looks good. Now let's move on to the final step, configuring them to work together. We now have an external indicator, new campaign website visits, and an external breakdown country. The final step is to configure them to work together so that the indicator actually uses the breakdown. If we don't do this, the breakdown won't be available to use on scorecards and widgets. We do this from the external indicator form. First, we add the breakdown. Then we add an SQL statement that calculates the score value for each breakdown element. The SQL we added before on the breakdown form selects which breakdown elements to collect. This SQL links those elements to the indicator scores. Let's take a closer look at the important elements of this SQL statement. It must use the same aggregate function as the indicator's SQL statement. Return the aggregate value as the alias value. Return the breakdown element unique key as the alias ID. Use the same where clause that we used in the indicator, so we're evaluating the same data. Finally, make sure you group the data by the column that contains the breakdown element. Now that we've created and connected our data objects, let's click Test Collection again to verify that this new SQL statement is correct and connecting to the data source. It's important to note that clicking Test Collection verifies the integrity of individual SQL statements and their connection to the external data source. It doesn't verify the integrity of the SQL statements in the context of one another. So if you find errors in your data, but all the SQL statements have tested correctly, review them to make sure they also make sense together. We can see from the message that testing was successful. So from a configuration point of view, we're finished. Next steps would be to collect data for this indicator and start visualizing it. The ServiceNow platform is your system of record for most of your important data. By adding external data sources as performance analytics indicators, you can visualize all of your data together in the ServiceNow platform. For more information, please see the product documentation, knowledge base, or podcast, or ask a question in the ServiceNow community. For cost-effective training solutions, contact ServiceNow Training and Certification.